She was sitting on the couch when the can hit her. She felt blood slide down her temple where it split her skin. Now he was holding a frying pan. Her heart raced as time seemed to slow. That strange, stretching moment when your body knows something terrible is coming before your mind can catch up. The last thing she said was, "I told you I was sorry." You're listening to True Crime Culinary. I'm your host, Leah Llach. Let's sink our teeth into this story. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of True Crime Culinary. I'm your host, Leah, and I am excited is not the right word, but I wanted to dig into this story. It was actually one of the first ones that I scripted, but it's a hometown story for me, and it's a little emotional, but I think you're going to be really interested in elements of the story. The opening story is about Gwen Araujo, a young woman who was killed for living as herself. And what makes this a hometown is that I actually went to school with Gwen before she transferred to another high school. We didn't know each other, but I remember passing her in the hallway, and her face is one I can still see clearly. I remember knowing who she was, not because she told me, but because people whispered when she walked by. Gwen was born in 1985 in Brawley, California. Her parents divorced when she was a baby. By 1999, when she was around 14, she had come out as trans. She started growing her hair, planned to begin hormone therapy later in life, and tried, in the way teenagers do, to imagine a future for herself. That took courage, especially then. She was bullied and she switched schools. She tried to carve out some space. I remember hearing things secondhand through rumors and comments. This is the kind of quiet cruelty that never really leaves you alone. And she was beautiful. Thin eyebrows because it was the late 90s and a softness people didn't know what to do with. But she was still a kid. So in 2002, when Gwen was 17, she met 4 men. These douchebags, Michael Madgenson, Jose Morel, Jaron Neighbors, and Jason Cazares. They hung out, they flirted, they smoked weed, some of them hooked up with her, but suspicion crept in. Their curiosity turned into fixation, and fixation turned into cruelty. By early October, that tension had sharpened into something dangerous. And on October 3rd, they were all at a party, and at some point someone said, "If it's a man, she ain't gonna leave." And another voice added, "Whatever you do, make sure you don't make a mess." Just take a second and sit with that. Gwen tried to leave, but they stopped her, they pulled at her skirt, grabbed at her body, tried to expose her. She begged them to stop. She said, "Please don't. I have a family." But they didn't stop. One of them struck her with a can of food, denting the can and splitting her skin. Then came the frying pan. Her last words were, "I told you I was sorry." What they did next is they bound her wrists and ankles. They strangled her, they beat her again, just totally berserking. And when she stopped moving, they wrapped her in a blanket, loaded her into a truck, and drove 4 hours away to the Sierra Nevada mountains, where they buried her in a shallow grave. And this next part makes me pretty sick. On their way home, they stopped for McDonald's. Gwen's body was found 2 weeks later. At the trial, everything was exposed in horrifying detail. The defense tried to argue trans panic, that these men had been tricked, provoked, and somehow justified. But California rejected the argument. The case sparked outrage. It fueled activism, and eventually it helped lead to the Gwen Araujo Justice for Victims Act, which limited the use of that so-called panic defense in court. It didn't bring Gwen back, but it mattered. So when I think about Gwen, I still think about that hallway, about the whispers and the looks and how easy it is for cruelty to grow when no one interrupts it. She wasn't a curiosity, she wasn't a secret, she was a teenager, a daughter and a friend, a person trying to figure out who she was, and she deserved to grow up. But one detail I keep coming back to is the can. A can of food, something designed to preserve life, became the first weapon used against Gwen. I should say physical weapon. And what makes that so unsettling is that cans exist for one reason, and it is typically to keep things alive longer. When canned food was first developed, it wasn't meant for kitchens. It was meant for war. In 1795, during the French Revolutionary Wars, Napoleon Bonaparte offered a cash prize to anyone who could solve a logistical nightmare. How do you feed an army when fresh food can't travel? A French chef, about to murder this name, named Nicolas Appart, discovered that if food was sealed in containers and heated long enough, it wouldn't spoil. He didn't know about bacteria since germ theory wouldn't arrive for decades, but he knew the results were repeatable. Food could outlast distance. So early cans weren't the tidy, lightweight objects we know today. They were thick and heavy because they were literally handmade from tin-coated steel that someone had to hammer into the shape of an actual can. Each one had to be cooked for hours, sometimes up to 6 hours, just to be considered safe. And here's the part that always gets me. The can opener didn't exist yet. So for decades, people preserved food in metal containers they had no proper way to open. So imagine you're a soldier and you've been instructed to use a hammer, a chisel, a rock, or your bayonet to open the can of food that you've been given in those trenches. I mean, what a downer. You're cold, you're soaked, you're exhausted, and you're sitting there trying to pry open dinner with the same blade you used moments earlier to stay alive. So that's how early canned food was eaten. The first can opener wouldn't be patented until the 1850s, nearly 50 years after cans were already in widespread use. And even then, it was clumsy and dangerous, more like a curved knife than the smooth turn tools we recognize now. Canned food came before convenience, it came before comfort, and it came before safety. As wars piled on top of wars, manufacturers improved the process. Cooking times dropped from hours to minutes. Machines standardized can shapes, and costs fell. By the mid to late 19th century, cans moved out of military supply chains and into civilian kitchens. At first, they were novelties and status symbols, something middle-class households showed off, proof of modernity. But wars have a way of forcing progress. Complaints from soldiers about spoiled food, dented cans, and unsafe meals pushed innovation forward. By World War I, canned food was no longer experimental, it was actual infrastructure. So by the early 1900s in the United States, canned goods reshaped domestic life. They promised meals that didn't depend on a season, food that didn't require time or skill to preserve, and a sense of control in a world that often felt like it was falling apart. During the Great Depression, cans meant actual survival. During World War II, they meant endurance. And afterward, they meant convenience. Shiny labels lined up on shelves, promising abundance and order. Canned food flattened inequality, at least on the surface. Anyone could open a can and eat the same meal. And eventually, opening the can became easy. What stayed the same was the object itself. Cans are heavy for a reason. They're built to withstand pressure, to be stacked, shipped, dropped, handled roughly, and still protect what's inside. The same qualities that make cans good at preservation also make them capable of harm. That's the part we rarely talk about. What haunts me is that the can didn't fail. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It didn't shatter, it didn't break apart, it absorbed impact. The food inside was preserved, but the person was not. Canned food represents humanity's attempt to outsmart decay, to stop time, to hold nourishment still for later. It's one of the clearest examples of how much effort we've put into protecting things. But Gwen's story forces a harder question. How have we figured out how to preserve food more than 200 years ago, but we're still learning how to protect people, especially those who are punished for being visible? Every can on a shelf was designed to keep what's inside alive for years. And Gwen deserved at least that much care. Thanks for listening to another episode of True Crime Culinary. I hope that you enjoyed learning a bit about can and canned history as much as it made you think about Gwen's story. Like I said, I can still see her face in my mind's eye, and makes me sad that she met such a tragic and cruel end. I hope the douche canoes involved in her murder meet an untimely end wherever they are. And meanwhile, I hope you have a wonderful week. As always, if you have any stories or questions you want me to answer, feel free to email me at truecrimeculinary@gmail.com, all one word. I love hearing from you. And until then, see you next week. Until Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen.